And you'll be notified when it comes up. All right. Well, one thing, I've written 15 books, and what we did, if you didn't know about it, this one here, we said we were going to be like Disney and open up the vault and let out the ones who have been out of print. This one was out of print for several years, it's Legacy from the Stars. And we kept getting emails and people saying, don't you have a damaged, torn up copy around somewhere? Because they wanted to have all of them. And we found on Amazon, they were selling this for $100 for a used copy. And so we said, we should have held on to some. But we said, maybe we better bring it back out, and at least a limited edition. Of course, the people who are selling them for that price are not going to be happy. But so we have printed it again, and it's Legacy from the Stars, so now all of them are out. But there are some of mine that we're going to go out of print. So you just never know. If the demand comes up again, we may reprint them. You probably know this one is the one I sat on for 40 years. That's the one of my beginning. That came out after the conference, I believe, in July. I don't think we had it at the conference, did we? Last year. A lot of you know how I started out, I think. I'm just going to give a little abbreviated version, but I've been doing hypnosis for over 40 years. I started out in the 1960s when nobody knew anything about any of this. And this is the story of how it all began. That's what we call it, the beginning. But when I started out 40 years ago, we were just doing hypnosis for habits. Stop smoking, lose weight, watch the shiny object, that kind of thing, the long, drawn-out induction techniques, which aren't done anymore. But that was all we were doing it for. And we accidentally, if anything is ever an accident, stumbled into reincarnation. So it's quite a story, because in those days there was nothing out to tell anybody what to do. New Age wasn't heard of yet. We didn't hardly hear about reincarnation in this part of the world at all. They didn't know anything about past life regression. Hypnosis was not done for that. The only book out at that time was The Search for Bridie Murphy. And that one wouldn't even be published today. It's too simple, too ordinary. But that was the only thing out at that time. And there were no books to tell any hypnotist what to do if you did get into a situation where there were past lives would come up. So we started out in the very, very beginning. And this is the story of my husband and I and how it all happened and how it came to a very tragic end. But it was all designed to get me to where I am right now. How many of you don't know how I started? There's not very many. I'll just give it real brief because we have a lot of information to cover tonight. But my husband and I were living on a Navy base. He was career Navy, 21 years. And we were stationed down in Texas. He just got back from Vietnam. And we'd learned how to do hypnosis, and just the simple kind, and we were working on that, helping people on the base. And the doctor on the base had a case of a young woman who, what is called nervous eating. Is that echoing to you? Is it? Okay, yeah, because to me it's bouncing off the walls. I'm getting all kinds of sound distortion. Well, he had a woman who he called nervous eating. She was very obese, and her kidneys were bad. And he asked us, could we just get her to relax? That was all he wanted us to do. And when we were doing the sessions with her, she ended up going back into a past life, where she was in Chicago in the 1920s as a roaring flapper, living with the gangs. And it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because it was totally unexpected. So even from the beginning, without knowing what we were doing, having any instructions at all, we dove right into all of this because of curiosity. And we ended up taking her through 5 lives, and that's why it's called 5 Lives Remembered. But in those days, nobody knew anything about it. So the people on the base began to hear what we were doing, we kept her anonymous, and they came to the house and was listening to the next chapter. We were doing all of this on the portable recorders of the day, those big reel-to-reels. You remember those? Portable, you could hardly lift the thing. And so we had to do it at the house. And they would come because they wanted to know the next chapter. Nobody had ever heard about anything like this. In a way, it was opening people's minds to something totally unknown in those days. And everybody began talking about it. Well, we took her through 5 different lives. And then, in the middle of all of this, my husband was almost killed. He made it back from Vietnam fine, but he was on his way to the base one night and was almost killed by a drunken officer who hit him head on, and he had a Volkswagen bus. And you imagine what the head-on collision in a Volkswagen bus is. There's nothing in front of you. There's no motor or anything, so he was ground into the metal. He should have died that night. It was very, very bad. His entire body was crushed. So what ended up happening, they had to cut him out, cut the wreckage apart. They didn't have those jaws of life in those days. And they brought in the helicopter and got him into the hospital. And when I got there, well, the only thing that saved his life was there was a corpsman following him behind, in the car behind him, who had just got back from Vietnam. So he knew how to work with trauma cases. Otherwise, he would have bled to death right there because he lost all the blood in his body. His body was crushed, his face was torn apart, and they got him into the helicopter and got him to the hospital. And then I followed over there. They came and got me. So at the hospital, when I was waiting, he was in intensive care. 5 doctors, one after the other, came out and said, there's no way he can live. There's too much trauma to the body. All these lists of things that were going to kill him during the night. Well, when we were doing this hypnosis experiment, not knowing what we were doing, no rules or anything, we were trying everything. So toward the end, we had her go into the future. And we said, just to see, out of curiosity, what we would be doing and what she would be doing. So we took her into the future, and she saw us living in the situation where we are now. We live on top of a mountain out here in Arkansas, in the country, and she saw us there with grandchildren. So that was all she said. But that night, when the doctors were telling me there was no way he could possibly live, I kept telling them, you're wrong, you're wrong. I couldn't tell him how I knew, just that I knew if she saw us in the future, he had to be going to live through all of this. But what happened was so magnificent, because when we took her through the 5 lives, she went back to the beginning where she was created by God. And we found a God that was so love and full of love, I knew he couldn't punish somebody for just asking questions and wanting to know more information. So I knew we had to believe it. I had to believe it all. So I knew he wasn't going to die that night. But in the days that followed, they had to put him back together piece by piece. They called him the Miracle Man, because they said he had no way he could have lived through any of this. And if he did live, he was going to be a vegetable because of all the brain trauma. Well, they thought they were going to do plastic surgery, and the doctors came and told me, we're not going to have to do anything. Every space is going back together without anything being done. Of course, he was unconscious there for several months as all this was happening. But the thing about it was, you got to think, I guess, we changed the belief system of a lot of people on that base. Then the word began to get around what had happened to him. They were all saying, this is your punishment for what you were doing. Peeking around hidden corners, reincarnation, for goodness sake, work of the devil. And so that's what they kept saying, this is what was happening to us because of what we were involved with. I couldn't believe it. I never could. So it ended up, anyway, he was in the hospital for a year, 8 months in a body cast. I couldn't even begin to imagine what that would be like to not be able to move for 8 months. But when he was finally put out of the Navy, after he got out of the hospital, he was put out of the Navy, and we moved to Arkansas, where we had to build our life all over again. And he was in a wheelchair for 25 years. So during that time, I had to put the idea of hypnosis on the back burner while I was taking care of him and raising a big family. So it was 10 years, now it'll be over 30 years ago, I decided to get back into this. It's like, what do you do now with the empty nest syndrome when the kids are leaving? They're going off, getting married, and going to college. What are you going to do with your life? That experience that we had opened a door. I found we could time travel. We could go through time. We could be there in these things. It was a wonderful adventure. And I said, that's what I want to do. That's the kind of therapy I want to do, is take people in past lives. So that's what, when it came time, I started learning some of the newer methods that were now involving imagery and visualization. And as I did them, I was focusing on past life regression and past life therapy. Then I began to develop my own system because I never had any rules or regulations. So my whole training has been just what I have learned myself over the last 30 years. So during this last 30 years, I found a way to contact what I call the source of all knowledge. This is not your normal hypnosis. I think when you take these classes, you're taught by what somebody was taught them, what somebody taught them, and somebody taught them, going all the way back. You never really know why you're doing what you're doing. But because I didn't have that, I was free to experiment. And as I began to develop the technique, I said, why do I have to do those things? Isn't it easier to do it a different way? So that's why I developed my own way of doing hypnosis. And this is what I'm teaching now all over the world, because I found a way. The past lives are the beginning, the very tip of the iceberg. And if you read my earlier books, they deal with when I was beginning what I call time travel, going back in time when the person was there in that time period and living what was happening to them. It was really time travel. That was my first books that I was writing about those cases that came to me. And people said, how did I find my subjects? I never went looking for anybody. They found me in the hills of Arkansas. But I think they had a lot to do with all of this. Nothing is ever a coincidence. So our first books I wrote were the Jesus books, and then the Nostradamus books came along. But as I developed the technique, I work in the deepest possible level of trance. You have to understand these things, because sometimes I give a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, somebody will say, I still don't understand how you got this information. So that's why I'm trying to give you a little bit of background. But I work in the deepest possible level of trance. And the other methods always say, don't go there. Don't work in the deep level. Strange things happen there. If you read my books, you know strange things happen there. But to me, that's where all the information is and all of the knowledge. So I'd rather work in the deep level. You get the conscious mind out of the picture. It cannot interfere. And it is like going through time in a time tunnel. The person is there. They are that person. Anything in our time period that did not exist in their time period, they won't even know what you're talking about. They are totally there. So to me, as a curious person, that was really a wonderful way to research history. Now, people say they think I'm a psychic or a channel. I'm not. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I consider myself to be the reporter, the investigator, the researcher of lost knowledge. Because as I did this work, I began to get information that had been lost, never known or forgotten. And I was supposed to bring it back into our time period. That's where my books are, and they keep coming, and more information is there. But where my information comes from, and where the healing in my work comes from, is this power that I'm telling you about. That's why I said having a past life regression, anybody can do it that knows how. That's the tip of the iceberg. You're going to get some information, but you're not going to get what is possible. And that's why I go to this other source. The part that I get my information from, I call it the subconscious. But it's not the subconscious the way it's defined by psychiatrists. That's a childish part of the mind. That's the part of the mind that you use when you're doing habits, stop smoking and lose weight. That is not the part that I work with. I call it the subconscious because I didn't know what else to call it. It began coming through over the years, and then I found a way to call it in, and now I work with it constantly. But you may say, if you want to define it, you may say it's the oversoul, the higher self, the higher consciousness. It is so big and so huge, it has the answers to everything. It has total knowledge. It is so full of love. It's so big, but yet it cares about each and every person. It's beautiful to work with. And this is where the healings come from. I'm not doing any of it. I'm just a facilitator. But I see miracles every day in my office now because I found a way to call it in during the session, and it does the healings. And I've seen it happen instantly in one session. I have people coming now from all over the world just for a session. And I don't encourage that because, you know, that's a long way to come. I see lots of cancer cases. I call them they, because I asked them one time, who am I speaking to? What is this? And they say, you may want to say we are the collective. I said, that sounds like the Borg on Star Trek. We're the collective, we are a group. And people say, well, maybe you're speaking to their guides and guardian angels. No. The guides and the guardian angels have a purpose, but they're down here. You can get information from them, but not this kind of information. And they say, maybe you're speaking to the ascended masters. That's not what it is either, because I've been told the ascended masters are just like you. They're beings, they're people. They're the ones who have got enough knowledge, they don't need to come back to Earth anymore. They are over there and doing their job, but they're still in that other part. What I'm speaking to is way, way above that. And it is full of love. When I work, you can feel the love in the room. In my classes now, we have a website where they can interact and talk to each other, so they're never left alone out there. If they have difficulty in cases, they can talk to each other and ask for advice. And we just had one come the other day. People say, if they take your class, can they do what you do? They can, because one of them on the website said, when I'm working with the subconscious, they said, I want to get on my knees. It's so powerful and so full of love. And she said, I've seen what they can do, and the energy is tremendous. And that's what I'm working with all the time. And I think it comes over on me because I'm in that energy all the time. But over the time, I did the UFO work and ET work for 25 years. And I got a lot of information there because I was speaking directly to the ETs. But then it began to go into this more complicated information, and that's when I started writing the Convoluted Universe series, because it was going beyond UFOs, and that's when they began coming in and giving us this more complicated metaphysical theories and concepts. They've told me all of your questions will never be answered. Some knowledge is as poison rather than medicine. because the human mind is incapable of understanding it. There is nothing in the human mind that can handle the totality of all of it. It's way, way beyond us. They said it's not the human brain, it's the mind. They can give us some things, they can give us information, and they do the best they can. I'm so full of questions. I want to know everything. And they make jokes about that. Now see, how can this be a fake or fraud, and I've been accused of everything, when it happens through every single person that comes to see me? And I see thousands and thousands of people. It's always the same voice, always the same terminology, the same phrases, and they go to work instantly. So we've tapped into something that knows every single one of you, knows all about you. There are no secrets at all. That's how it knows why you have the problem, and it can handle it. But that's the part that I work with. And I see lots of cancer patients. They dissolve the tumors instantly. This is what's amazing. I've seen it happen again and again and again. But see, first you have to find why this happened. Because, you know, the ideal state of the human body should be perfect health at all times. You should never, ever be sick. The human body is a miraculous machine that has been created to take care of itself and heal itself if we don't interfere. That means the doctors are not necessary. I have doctors coming to me as clients. I have psychiatrists coming. Every walk of life you can possibly imagine. Everybody's got a problem. And people are very complicated. That's what I do, is the counseling and the therapy with them. But we're finding out that a lot of these doctors are telling me they're getting out of the medical profession and going over into alternative and natural healing. Because that's where it is. And I'm working with doctors now all over the world. I teach a class at the college in New Mexico that is involved with alternative healing. So this is, to me, is the way we're going. This is they say it's the therapy of the future, is the natural. So, if you make yourself sick, your mind is that powerful, it's also powerful enough to heal you. First, you're going to find out, why did I do this to myself? And people tell me, I don't want to be sick. What do you mean? Every illness you have created yourself. You've done it. And that's what we find out is why. Why did I do this to myself? What I was trying to tell myself. Every ache, pain, symptom is a message to you. It's trying to tell you something. You got to find out, what is it trying to tell you? And when you find out, it's going to go away, because why should you keep trying to give you the message once you've already received it and understood it? This is the way it works, and it's miraculous. I've had people come a lot of them come that are scheduled for surgery, because they say no surgery, no invasion of the body. It's totally unnecessary. And of course they say once something's been taken out, we can't put it back if we can get it before it's taken out. And they also say no drugs. Every drug has a side effect. That's why they encourage the use of natural herbs and minerals and things like that. And this is what I mean. I'm working with the natural doctors, and we have in our office on our Rolodex the numbers of people who have left the medical profession and opened their own natural health clinics. So people do call us for references. But once you understand all of this, this is what I work with. And we do go to the past life, because sometimes we get information there that's going to help the person. But it's not all there is. When we get to them, then everything is done. And this is where the information comes from that I write about. And it doesn't come through one person. It comes through many, many, many people. To me, it's like putting a puzzle together. I'll get one piece of information from one person, another piece from somebody else, and then eventually begins to all make sense, and I'll get the whole story. And this has been happening for years. And if you read The Convoluted Universe, this is where all of a sudden the session will not be past lives, it'll be going to a place where this information has to come through. It's what's best for the person, but also it's giving me the information they want me to pass on. To show there's no way this could be made up, I would be in England doing a session with someone. They never interrupt the therapy part. They always try to take care of the person. But toward the end of the session, they'll say, Dolores, this is the next piece of information you need for your next book, the next theory. And they'll give me something I've never heard of before. And if I don't understand it, I'll say, can you make it a little clearer? Because they say our minds are incapable of handling it. And I said, well, give me an analogy. Give me something so I can understand what you're trying to tell me. And they do the best they can in our limited human language. They go with symbols, with mind to mind, and it's much easier. So they said, we'll do the best we can. They give me some information. And this is the next concept, and it'll always be something I haven't heard of. Then maybe a week later, I'll be back in the States doing another session with somebody else. It'll happen again. They'll come through at the end of the session, continue talking about what they had done the week before. So they expand upon the knowledge and the information they want me to have. That's why it takes a while to get all the pieces together. And if you've read the Convoluted Universe books, you know it's what it is. I try to put several sessions together on the same subject. But it's amazing the information that keeps coming in. This is where the Convoluted Universe books came from. Each one's a little more complicated and a little more complicated as I got more and more information. When I got to the end of Convoluted 3, if you read that one, I was going to end it with a chapter that was called The Final Solution. Well, what was going to happen if we didn't get our act together? That there are souls on earth who are here to destroy all of us if we don't get our act together. And, I mean, these are people who have no knowledge of these things consciously. It's their contracts they came in with, and it's in the subconscious level. And so they're as amazed as anybody when this information comes out. Well, I was going to end the book with that, and my daughter Julia said, no, that's too negative. You need to end it on something that's more hopeful. Although the book was already getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, that book ended up being 700 pages. Well, the next week, I was in Montreal, and they came through and took over the entire session, and they gave me the last chapter was the absorption. And there was also information I'd never heard before. But at the end of the chapter, I said, well, I don't think there's anything left that you can tell me, because they keep expanding my mind. And because what I'm getting now, I could never have understood when I began 30 years ago. They are so wise. They said, if you can't give it to you all at once. They drop little crumbs, digest this, one little spoonful, then they move on, give you a little more. Once you've digested that, give you a little more. And that's how it's been over this time. What I'm getting now, I would never have understood in the beginning. I would have just thrown it away and said, no, it doesn't make any sense. But they're very wise about that. So at the end of that chapter, when I said, I don't think there's anything left you can tell me, they said, oh, there's more. There's more. And I ended that book at that. There is more coming. During one session, one of the most common questions, I call it the eternal question that everybody wants to know that comes to see me. They all want to know, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I on the right track? Some people are worried that they're running out of time and they're not going to be able to do their purpose. And they will tell the person if it's appropriate, because sometimes it's not time for you to know, and everything has to have its time. And one man, I always tell them that, they'll tell you if it's appropriate. This one man wanted to know what his purpose was. They came through and said, we can't tell him, it's not time. But they said, oh, we wish we could. You don't know what we see. But they said, consider he's where you were 20 years ago. You don't give a baby a 3-course meal. You give a baby milk, and you give a baby cereal, crushed vegetables. You don't give a baby a steak. So you have to go slowly. That's what I mean by spoon feeding. And that's why I didn't think people could understand the Convoluted Universe series, because they were full of such complicated concepts. But people said they don't care, they don't know, they don't understand it, they make them ask questions. So that's where it just keeps going in that direction. There are times I wish we could go back to the simpler days when it was the history that I was working on. I've got tons of information that will be books down the line on history the way it really was. That's a book further on. I love that, but they keep going into these other directions, and I have to follow where it is. I'm working on Convoluted 4 now. People keep saying, if you got enough information, it pours out of people. I have enough information for 3 more books. That's the problem. It's too much. So I'm trying to decide to compartmentalize it. Is it going to go in this book or that book? But there is enough for Convoluted 4, and there's more concepts that we haven't even approached. Some of them I'll be talking about tonight, but it just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding. So there's other information coming through on other topics that I think will have to be a separate book. So it's all getting there. Everybody keeps saying, when's Convoluted 4 coming out? Well, it's still in my computer right now. And then I'm still having sessions, and more it keeps coming. Okay. And I'm hoping you understand how I get this. What's his name? Jung, is that how you pronounce it? The psychiatrist. One of the fathers of psychiatrists was Freud and Jung. I always want to say Jung instead of Jung. When he was doing his work in the very, very beginning of psychiatry, he was using hypnosis. And he discovered what he called the universal consciousness. I think this is the same thing, except that when he found it, he was afraid of it. And he stopped his work. And he never did hypnosis again. He went over into the theory of psychiatry and developed that branch instead. If only he had stayed with this, I think we would have been much further ahead by now. But he didn't know what he was dealing with, and it must be very frightening. But I'm just so curious. And I love the energy, so that's the part I'm working with. Okay. So the part we're going to be focusing on tonight is what I've been lecturing about lately. I've gone away from the Nostradamus prophecies because I lectured on that for 20 years. My books are the only ones that have ever translated and interpreted all 1,000 of the prophecies. It's the most accurate interpretation that's ever been written. It took 3 years to do it, and direct contact with Nostradamus himself as he was writing them. Fantastic story. And for 20 years, I was lecturing on that all over the world. But he kept saying, this, what I'm telling you, is the worst. This is the worst case scenarios. This will what would happen if you don't do something to stop it. And that's what he was telling us this for. And he wanted me to go all over the world and tell people the power they had to change these predictions. He said, if you know which path you're going down, you can do something to stop it with the power of your mind. Because he said, you don't realize the power of your mind. And if the power of one man's mind is powerful enough to change something, imagine the power of group mind. Because it's not only multiplied, it is squared. And the power is tremendous. And that's why he wanted me to go places and tell people they have a metaphysical group, they have prayer groups, any kind of a group. If they could just take 5 minutes out of their meetings and focus on peace and harmony, that would be the world we would create. So that's what I was doing all that time. And I think we've made a difference. because the worst has not happened. He saw time as not a straight line. He saw it going off in many different branches of all the probabilities and possibilities that are possible, from the worst to the least of any situation. It all depends on what people do. The same is true in your life. You come to crossroads, and you know if you took one branch, your life would be totally different than the other branch. That was what he saw. He saw all of the possibilities. And if you knew which line you were traveling down and knew where it was going, you could make changes by focusing on the opposite of what he saw. So that was what I was doing all these years. And according to the prophecies, we should have been in a terrible war with the Middle East by the beginning of the year 2000. Well, it hasn't happened. We did go to war, but I believe now we went into one of the lesser paths that he saw. People say, well, they didn't come true. I think they did. We just went into another timeline that's taken us away from that. So now we're headed into the time of the great genius and the time of computers and all of those things he saw about computers and the world we're going into and the new world. He saw all of that. That's where we're heading now. And I think we have avoided the worst that we were headed down before all of this happened. So anyway, where's I going with all of that? That was what I was focusing on all that time. But now, the information we're getting, we are going in a different direction. And what I'm lecturing on now and what I'm doing on the Coast to Coast, people have heard me on there where you talk all night long on the radio. And believe me, that's a long time. At least they have commercial breaks. And I just did the Project Camelot too, and they wanted me to focus on the 3 waves of volunteers. So that's the ones I'm going to be talking about tonight, are the 3 waves. And this took a long time to get all the pieces. It's scattered throughout the Convoluted Universe books, as I got little pieces of what it was all about. And then it's only been over the last year or so I began to get more pieces that ties the whole story together. So, in order to explain all of this, I've got to go back to the beginning of the world. It's a long way. But you all understand where I get my information from now. I have a memory that never forgets anything. So I have to have all of this information, all of these parts, and be able to remember it all, and then put it together and refer back and forth between the different books. So maybe that's why I'm supposed to be doing this. I don't know. But I have such a curiosity about history, and I want to know everything. So maybe that's, I got chosen for this, or whatever you want to say. I can't get out of it now, that's for sure. Okay. The information goes back, and it's in The Keepers of the Garden, is where we had the first information about the seeding of the planet Earth and where we all came from. And then The Custodians is the story of my 25 years working with the UFOs and ETs. They expand upon this information because they said, you must know the story of how life began on Earth. So I'm going to have to go back that far so you'll understand what's happening right now and why we're going into the new Earth and what's happening to the people in the 3 waves. It all fits together. Well, in the beginning of life on Earth, they said there are councils. There are councils over planets. There are councils over solar systems. There are councils over galaxies. Each one of them has rules and regulations that they live by. Nothing is random. Everything is very regulated out there. So they keep watch over all of the planets, and you can imagine what a job that would be. They keep track of everything, and they said in these councils are the history of all of the planets. They said when a planet reaches the point when it can support life, that's a very momentous time in the history of that planet. And at that time, they'd have to decide what kind of life are we going to introduce on that planet. And I think with this kind of a group, you can follow these things because people say, what does God have to do with any of this? God is very much involved too. It's the evolutionary theory and the creationist theory mixed together, and it all fits beautifully the way they explain it. But when I've had people in sessions go back to when the earth was forming and whenever the volcanoes were erupting, there was no life on earth. There was just too much ammonia in the air. I've had them go back to those times and tell me what the life was like at that time. I've had them go to the times whenever life was being created. Many of you probably had these past lives too, but you don't remember these things on a conscious level. I've had them go to where they were helping form the oceans, form the first life. Because we've all been creators. We've all been parts of this. We just don't remember because they're focused on this life right now. But if it's important for the person to know, it will all come out. So I think I'm not going against your belief systems. Just stay with me on this anyway. So when they said the planet got to the point it can support life, there is a group that was called the archaic ones, the ancient ones, have been around forever. They are the ones who began the seeding of the planet Earth. They did it because in their beginning, that's how they started. Someone came and seeded life on their planets. And when they got to the point that they could travel in space, they began going through the galaxies, planting seeds also, and developing races that got to the point where they could carry on the work. Eventually, we're going to be involved in the same thing. And you know, with the curiosity of our scientists, if they find a planet out there they think can grow something, you know they're going to do it. And they said we will be a very welcome addition to what they call the Federation because of our curiosity and our creativity. So we will all be a part of this at the time. I've had people go back to when they were there, when the earth was being cooled down, when the oxygen, the ammonia in the air was being taken out so that life could form. First you had to have the atmosphere, then you had to have the water, then you had to have the plants. And they were there doing all of these steps. Many of these people have gone to lives where they were the seeders, the planters. And other ones have gone to lives when they were the recorders, where they had to go back and see how things were advancing, how they were developing. All of this must have taken millions of years, but this is part of what they do. They go throughout the galaxy checking on all these different things. I'm trying not to stay too much on one subject here, but it's quite complicated. Okay, so I asked them one time, where did the cells come from that began the whole thing? They said it doesn't matter. They come from everywhere. As they travel through the universes, they are collecting cells. They're collecting sperm and ova to be used in these projects down the line. This is part of what they do. They collect animals. They collect everything because they will be used for future seedings of other planets. And when they first brought the cells and put them on Earth, the idea was to get it to develop into a multi-celled organism, to start dividing. They didn't care what it was going to develop into. They didn't care what it was going to look like as long as life would be established on Earth. Because it all depends on the primeval soup in the atmosphere and the chemicals on what anything is going to look like. They told me one time, you'd be surprised what you could have looked like. But the species develops according to the line it goes. We developed along the mammal line. Other planets develop along the reptilian line or the insectoid line. It doesn't matter. Some of them are combinations of different types. We developed along the mammal line. But they bring in the cells and they get them to turning into multi-celled organisms. They come back from time to time checking on everything. And they said, you have no idea how fragile life is. Because sometimes they would come back And it had been developing, something was beginning to form, and then they would come back and check on it again, and it had all fallen apart and died. They said, life is so fragile. They have no idea how important life is and how delicate it is if they can get it going and keep it going. So then it begins to develop into plants, animals, and I'm going to condense a great deal here because I've done lectures on just this for many hours. So it develops into animals eventually. Then it came to the point they were going to have a human, something that had knowledge and intelligence. So, like I said, we were going along the mammal line. So they picked the ape because it had a large brain and also because it had hands. Had to have hands that would be able to make tools to create a civilization. So there was a lot of work done to change the ape with the genetic manipulation of the genes and to develop it into a person. They said you will never ever find the missing link. That's because it's jumped generations. Because it just happened so fast. And this is what the scientists can't understand. Even Darwin said he understood evolution through the animals and the plants, but when it got to man, it didn't make any sense at all. But that was when it jumped. So when they finally developed an intelligent human being, something that could begin to build cities and plant, then they knew they had to come and live among the developing species. No species ever just came out of the jungle and decided they're going to start planting or start building houses. They're out there hunting and gathering. So when they came and lived among the people, this is where your legends of the gods came from. They lived as long as they wanted. And they lived with the people to give them the knowledge they were going to need as they went along. Every culture in the world has the legend of the culture bringers. And the culture bringer always comes from the sky or from across the water. They all have, the Indians have their corn woman who brought them corn. The other ones have the one to bring them fire. They all have these gods that they have worshipped because they lived there. And I've had people go back to those times and they say, why do they call us gods? We're just beings. And they were just there to make sure everything was going okay. This was supposed to be a planet, a beautiful, beautiful planet with a species that would never get sick and never grow old. It was supposed to be a perfect species. Maybe that's where the idea of the Garden of Eden came from. I don't know. But it was supposed to be a perfect species. And they said, give this beautiful people intelligence and free will and see what they do with it. Many planets in the universes don't have free will. I've had people go to those planets, and it's a totally different way of living if you don't have free will. Some of them are really glad to get out of that life because they're not at all what you think. But free will is very important. So they said, we cannot ever go against the free will. So they give us free will. That's what was supposed to happen. We were never supposed to grow old. We were never supposed to die. We were never supposed to get sick. But something happened that spoiled the plan.